Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Active English with Carl. So in today's video, I wanted to explore the past perfect tense. I had studied, I had traveled, I had assumed. How does the past perfect tense compare to the present perfect tense? I have assumed, I have traveled, I have studied. How do we use this in normal everyday conversation? How do native speakers use these verb tenses in everyday English? So I'm Carl. I've been teaching English since 2007, and I make videos on YouTube that are very simple. They're organized into two parts, okay? The first part is where I do some teaching, a little bit of explanation of the main points related to the grammar, form, and function. The second part of the video is where we practice, we get active. I hope that you, the listener, can get involved in the learning experience. I really believe you learn by doing. So I'm going to give you some worksheets at the end of this video. These are worksheets that I've used in the classroom that I know are effective for learning this verb tense, the past perfect. Okay, so let's get started. Let's do it. Past perfect tense. Okay, so I want to start off by giving you just a little bit of context as far as where does this verb tense, the past perfect tense, fit into the larger picture, the bigger picture of all the verb tenses in English. So just have a look at this slide here, and there you can see that's a summary of all the verb tenses in English. The ones in green, those are the ones I want to talk about today, the past perfect tense. So there you see in statement form and question form, the past perfect tense, right? I had lived in New York, that's statement form. Had I lived in New York, that's question form. All right, so today we're just talking about the ones in green, okay? So to distinguish the present perfect tense and the past perfect tense, I just want to have a look at these two sentences here, okay? So here are two sentences which I think really highlight the main difference between these verb tenses. So have a look, if you will, at the first sentence, I have lived in Los Angeles, right? That's the present perfect tense. The second sentence, I had lived in Los Angeles, that is the past perfect tense. So think about, just for a minute please, think about the difference between these two sentences in terms of meaning, in terms of nuance, okay? And I'll come right back in just a second. Okay, so how are these two sentences different? The first sentence, I have lived in Los Angeles, that's present perfect. The second sentence, I had lived in Los Angeles, that is past perfect. Okay, the main difference here between these two sentences is the first sentence, I have lived in Los Angeles, that's present perfect. That can be used to talk about just one action. Whereas the second sentence, I had lived in Los Angeles, is not used for just one action. It's used for two actions. Okay, for example, if I say to you, I have lived in Los Angeles, period, that sentence is fine, right? There's no problem with that sentence. There's just one action in that sentence, my living in Los Angeles, but that sentence is complete. I have lived in Los Angeles, period. That's no problem. It's a good sentence. But if I say to you, I had lived in Los Angeles, period, that's not a good sentence. That's a bad sentence because the listener or the reader is expecting to hear about another action. So if you just say, I had lived in LA, period, you're leaving the listener hanging. The listener or the reader, they want to hear more. They want to hear about that other action that's contained in the simple past. So for example, I had lived in Los Angeles for 2 years before I got a job as an actor. I had lived, that's past perfect. I got a job, that's simple past. Which action happens first? The past perfect. The second action is the simple past. Both of these actions are finished in the past, but the point is we're covering two actions with the past perfect. With the present perfect, we're covering one action. Now, I just want to focus in on this sentence because it's such a classic construction. We use this all the time, the past perfect tense and the simple past. So let me just highlight this using different colors. So have a look at this slide here. I had lived in Los Angeles for 2 years. That's the past perfect. Before I got a job as an actor, that's the simple past, okay? In this construction, the past perfect perfect is always going to be the first action. It doesn't matter how you write this sentence, right? You could say, I got a job as an actor after I had lived in LA for 2 years, right? You can change the sequence in the sentence. It doesn't matter. The past perfect will always be your first action, with the simple past being the second action. Okay, let me just show this graphically. So just have a look at this orange slide here. Again, this highlights the difference between the present perfect, I have lived, and the past perfect, I had lived. Imagine right now I'm living in New York City. So if I'm living in New York City right now, I want to say I have lived. All right. You could also say I have been living if you want to stress the ongoing nature of that action. That's the present perfect progressive. All right. But have a look at Los Angeles, right? Los Angeles is finished, right? Now I live in New York City. I don't live in Los Angeles. So Los Angeles is finished. That action is finished. I had lived in LA, right? I had lived, or you could also say I had been living if you want to use the past perfect progressive, if you want to stress the ongoing nature of that action. All right, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, the difference between the past perfect and past perfect progressive. But the main point from this orange slide here is if it's finished, you want to say I had lived, or I had traveled, or I had studied. If it's into the present, right? If it's not finished, if it's into the present, you want to say I have lived, I have studied, I have driven. Okay, so in this context, Los Angeles would be I had lived, New York City would be I have lived. Okay, so why do we have the past perfect tense? What is the function? What is the purpose of the past perfect tense? Okay, many of my students ask me, why can't I just use the simple past for everything, right? If I want to talk about something that happened yesterday or a long time ago, I could just use simple past, right? And if I want to emphasize which action happened first, I could just say, first, yesterday, first I woke up, and then I had some coffee, and then I had my breakfast, and then I went to work, okay? All right, that's fine. Yeah, you can do that. You can use simple past for everything if you want to. But remember, language always moves towards efficiency, right? When you make a statement using these verb tenses, you're packing in a lot of information, a lot of efficiency, a lot of information in a very short sentence. And using the past perfect tense, it's much more efficient. It's really emphasizing to the listener, to the reader, which action happened first, okay? So again, if you want to emphasize that, use the past perfect tense, and then you don't have to say, okay, I did this first, and then I did that second, I did that third. It's not necessary if you just use the past perfect tense. So it's more efficient, right? It's a more efficient means of communication using the past perfect tense, all right? So to clearly show that one action occurred before another, you want to use the past perfect tense. I had lived in LA for 2 years before I got a job as an actor. That's really clear to the listener that you lived in LA for 2 years first, and then you got your job as an actor, okay? So that's one reason we have the past perfect tense. But there's another reason. There's another reason we have the past perfect tense, and that is sometimes we want to link, right? We want to couple. We want to associate two actions. Two actions, they sometimes have a contextual relationship to each other, okay? So for example, if I say, I had assumed, past perfect, I had assumed you would be at the party last night. So I was surprised. I was surprised when I didn't see you there, right? I had assumed you would be there. So I was surprised when I didn't see you there, right? So in this sentence, right, I had assumed, that's past perfect. That's not just a sequential action, that's a context, right? That's a background action. That's important for the story. It's setting the stage for my surprise. You see, the reason I'm surprised that I didn't see you at the party is because I had assumed that you would be there. You see, so these actions are not just sequential, like I woke up, I had some coffee, I went to work. That's just purely A, B, C, D, E, F, G sequence. In this sentence, I had assumed you would be at the party, so I was surprised. These are not just sequential actions. There's a context here, all right? The past perfect tense in this sentence is the background action, okay? So I like to think of it as the stage, okay? I talked about this in my second video when I was talking about the past progressive and the simple past. The past progressive, I was walking, is the stage upon which the simple past, when I saw my friend, right? I was walking down the street when I saw my friend. I was walking down the street. That's the background action. That's the stage upon which the simple past occurs, the actor on the stage. It's a very similar relationship with this this construction, the past perfect tense in the simple past. So you could say that the past perfect tense is the stage, the context, the background action upon which the simple past occurs. All right, so I had assumed that's your context, that's your background action, that's your stage. I was surprised when I didn't see you. I was surprised. That's the main action. That's the actor on the stage, okay? So a stage and an actor on the stage, they're not equal actions, right? There's a contextual relationship between these two. And that's what the past perfect captures. And the simple past, just using the simple past for everything, it doesn't really capture that contextual relationship, okay? So to summarize, those are your two reasons that we use the past perfect tense. Reason number one, when I want to be really clear and efficient about which action happened first. The past perfect is the first action, the simple past is the second action. And remember, both actions are finished, either a long time ago or just recently, just this morning. Could be this morning. I had just woken up when I realized we didn't have any coffee, okay? So that's not that long ago for me, just a few hours ago that it was morning. So that's a recent action, but they're both finished. They're both finished. So past perfect tense, you're comparing two actions, both of which are finished, okay? And when you want to be really clear about what action happened first, we use the past perfect tense. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is when you want to provide this sort of contextual relationship, the background action, when two actions are not just in sequence, but there's a context, okay? All right, so let's move on to, I want to talk about conjugation and pronunciation of the past perfect, and then I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the past perfect progressive, which is I had been living in Los Angeles. How is that different from I had lived? All right, it's not very different. It's just an ongoing action, but I want to spend just a minute on that. But first, let's talk about conjugation and pronunciation for just the past perfect tense. All right, so the past perfect tense, the conjugation is very simple. For a positive statement, you have the subject, you have the auxiliary had, and then you have the past participle, okay? I had eaten dinner before I ate the ice cream. I had eaten, you had eaten, he, she, it had eaten, we had eaten, plural, you guys, plural, you had eaten, and they, third person plural, they had eaten, okay? So just use the subject, the had, auxiliary, and then the past participle. For a negative statement, you want to use the subject, had not, which becomes hadn't, all right? Hadn't, and then the past participle. I hadn't eaten dinner before I ate the ice cream, okay? I hadn't eaten dinner, that's first person. I hadn't, you hadn't, he, she, it hadn't, okay? We hadn't, you guys, you hadn't, and they hadn't, all right? Pretty easy, right? It's just had, and then not, and then the past participle. Okay, what about pronunciation? And again, in these videos, I like to give you like real pronunciation, not textbook pronunciation, but how do people actually say this on the street, okay? So pronunciation for the past perfect statements. Let's look at I had lived in Los Angeles, for example. I had lived in LA becomes I'd lived. Do you hear that? I'd lived. Present perfect, I've lived. Past perfect, I'd lived. It's a slight D sound. So nobody says I had lived. Everybody says I'd lived. Okay, do you hear that D? Simple past, I lived. Simple past, I lived. Past perfect, I'd lived. Present perfect, I've lived. All right, but again, today we're just focusing on past perfect. So I'd lived, first person. All right, second person, you had lived, you'd lived. You hear that? Slight D, you'd lived. And third person, he'd lived. Or she'd lived, okay? First person plural, we'd lived. Second person plural, you'd lived. You guys, you'd lived. And third person plural, they'd lived. Okay, it's a slight D emphasis there, okay? So that's pronunciation for your statements. How about the questions for past perfect? Let's look at the questions. Had I lived in Los Angeles? Hear that sound? Had I? It's had I lived. Second person, had you lived? Had you lived in LA before you got a job as an actor? Had you lived there? How long had you lived there? Had you? All right, that's second person singular question form, past perfect. Had you lived? All right, what about third person singular? Had he lived? Had he lived? Had he lived there? How long had he lived there? Had he? What about she? How long had she lived there? Had she. Had she. All right. How long had she lived there before she got a job as an actor? Again, 2 actions. Had she. All right. What about first person plural? Had we lived? Had we. That sounds pretty much as it's written. Okay. Had we lived? Had we lived? Second person plural, it's much the same as second person singular. Had you lived? It's basically the same. Had you lived? Had you lived? Okay. Third person plural, had they lived? Had they lived? Had they lived? Okay. Had they lived? Okay, so let's talk about the past perfect progressive. Okay, what is the difference between saying I had lived in Los Angeles for 2 years before I got a job as an actor, or I had been living in Los Angeles for 2 years before I got a job as an actor? What's the difference? It's very slight. It's a slight difference in nuance and meaning, in sort of shade of context. Okay, I had lived in Los Angeles for 2 years before I got a job as an actor. I'm emphasizing in that sentence that 2 years was complete and finished before I got this job. It's like a discrete unit of time. I had been living in LA for 2 years before I got a job as an actor. I'm emphasizing that that act of living was not yet finished. It was ongoing. It was ongoing. It was taking a long time. And then I got a job as an actor. So it's a really slight difference in shade and meaning and nuance. If you want to emphasize that this action was happening over a long time, you want to use for or since, it's appropriate to use the past perfect progressive tense. I had been living. I had been driving. I had been talking. I'm emphasizing that that was a long action, it was ongoing, and it was not complete at the time that the second action occurred. The past perfect, I had lived in LA for 2 years before I got a job as an actor. In that sense, the 2 years is complete. Something is complete. Maybe I stayed in LA after that, maybe I didn't. We don't know, but we do know that 2 years is complete. When I say I had been living in LA for 2 years, I'm really emphasizing that those 2 years were not complete. It was an ongoing action. Okay, so it depends on your nuance, depends on your emphasis, but there's very little difference. I wouldn't get too hung up on the details of the difference between the past perfect and the past perfect progressive. Okay, what about conjugation and pronunciation? Okay, so conjugation of the past perfect progressive, we just use the subject, the auxiliary had, and then been, and then the present participle, the ing form. Okay. For negative statements, you use the subject. You use had not, which is hadn't. Been, and then the present participle. Okay, I hadn't been living in LA for 2 months before I met John, for example, in the negative statement. Okay, so that's conjugation. Let's talk about pronunciation, because this is a common construction. You do hear it a lot. The pronunciation for the first person singular for the past perfect progressive. I had been living in LA. I had been living in LA. What do you hear there? I'd been living. You hear a slight D sound, and then you kind of punch the been. I'd been living. You hear that? I'd been living in LA. That's first person. Second person, you'd been living. You'd been living. All right, again, slight D sound, punch the been. You'd been living. Third person, he'd been living. He'd been living. All right, she'd been living. First person plural, we'd been living. We'd been living. Second person plural, you guys, you all, you'd been living. You'd been living. That's exactly the same as the second person singular. And third person plural, they had been living, they'd been living, they'd been living. All right, so again, slight D sound, they'd, slight D sound, and then been, and then the ing form, they'd been living. Okay, let's talk about the pronunciation of the question form for the past perfect progressive really quick before we move on to the activity part of this video. That's part 2. So first person singular question form past perfect tense pronunciation. Had I been living in Los Angeles for 2 years before I got a job as an actor? Yes. Okay, question form, had I. So had I. You hear that? Had I been living? Had I been living? Had I been living? That's first person singular question. Had I been living? Second, had you been living? Had you been living? How long had you been living in there? How long had you been living there before you got the job as an actor? How long had you been living? Second person. How long had he been living? How long had she been living? You hear that sound? Third person singular. He or she. Had he been living? How long had he been living? How long had he been living? How long had she been living? How long had she been living there? Had she, had he been living? All right, that's third person singular. Let's talk about first person plural. How long had we been living? How long had we been living? How long had we been living? Had we been living? Had we been living? Second person plural, had you been living? Again, that's exactly the same as second person singular. How long had you been living there? Had ya? How long had ya? How long had you been living there? And third person plural, had they? How long had they been living there? How long had they? It sounds very much like it's written in that context. Had they been? How long had they been living in LA? Okay, so that's your pronunciation. All right. To quickly summarize the main point of this presentation about the past perfect tense, let's go back to that original slide with those two statements there. The first statement, I have lived in Los Angeles for 2 years. I can use that for one action that continues into the present. Okay. For the second statement, I had lived in Los Angeles for 2 years before I got a job as an actor. I'm using that for two actions, both of which are finished in the past. Could be a long time ago, could be this morning, could be recently. It doesn't matter, but they're both finished. And the past perfect is the first action. The simple past is the second action. The reason we use the past perfect tense, number one, is to emphasize which action happened first and to do it in a very efficient way. That's reason number one. Reason number two is when we want to contextualize an action. We want to create almost a cause and effect relationship, or at least a context where one action is the background action to the other one, right? I had assumed you would be at the party last night, so I was surprised when I didn't see you there, right? I had assumed. That's my background action. It's providing context to the second action, which is the simple past, and that's the main action, okay? So that's my talk about the past perfect tense. Again, don't get too hung up on past perfect versus past perfect progressive. They're really similar in nuance and meaning. It's just a slight difference there as far as the past perfect progressive is an ongoing action. All right. So that's it for me on my presentation. My videos, I like to kind of keep the teaching kind of short. I do a quick summary, quick overview, the way native speakers think about and use these verb tenses, these grammar formations in like regular conversation, okay? So that's part one. Let's start part two. This is the most valuable part of my videos, I believe. It's the active component. It's where you, the listener, get a chance to practice these verb tenses in context, like everyday context, using worksheets that I use in the classroom. Okay, I know these work. I know they're effective and they're fun. They're fun. For me, they're fun. I hope they're fun for you. I like to do 3 different worksheets. The first one is a listening part. The second one is grammar in context, where you choose the correct answer. And the third part is editing, where you look at a paragraph and try and find 5 mistakes. Okay, if you can do all 3 of these, then you're in really good shape. I think you definitely understand the past perfect tense. I had lived, I had assumed, I had walked. Okay, so let's do it. Let's start part 2. All right, let's begin with the listening part. You're going to hear 2 people talking. All right, this is Peter and Allie. If you've watched my other videos, you'll recognize these 2 folks. They're very familiar. All right, but you're going to hear a conversation, a dialogue between these 2 people, Peter and Allie, and they're going to be using the past perfect tense. They're also going to use a little bit of the present perfect tense, and they're going to use a little bit of the simple past, okay, in this conversation. Now, I've left some spaces blank. So when you listen, see if you can write down what you hear, okay? And then this tests listening comprehension, but it also tests your knowledge of these verb tenses related to past perfect, present perfect, and simple past, okay? So let's have a listen, and then let's come back and let's talk about why it's either past perfect or present perfect or simple past, as the case may be. By the way, all of these worksheets that I give you, all these verb tense summaries, the grammar forms, the functions, the slides, all this stuff is available on my website for free. I can give you the link down below. You can just go there. You can download the worksheets. You can follow along as you watch the video if that's useful for you. Okay, so let's do the listening part first. Here we go. Let's have a listen, and please, if you will, write down what you hear while you listen. Okay, and then I'll come right back and we'll talk about it. All right, I'll see you soon. Hey, Allie, you know how we were talking yesterday about how we used to study languages when we were in college? I was curious. Had you ever studied Spanish before you took it in college?
Yeah, actually, I had been living in Spain with a host family for 2 months during the summer of my sophomore year of high school when I began to really love the language and culture. That's when I decided to study Spanish in high school and later in college.
That's right, I remember. So you're pretty good at Spanish?
Soy bastante bueno en español.
That's awesome. Oh, by the way, not to change the subject, but are you getting hungry? I haven't eaten much today.
Actually, I am getting hungry, but didn't you just eat that pint of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream about an hour ago?
Yes, I did, but I hadn't eaten anything today before I ate that pint of ice cream. I'd love to eat again right now, but I'm not sure if we have any food since it's Saturday and we usually go out to eat.
Let me check. No, there's only ice cream, butter, and barbecue sauce in here. I went to the grocery store 2 days ago, but I hadn't planned to buy food for this weekend.
Yeah, I had thought about getting some food for today, but then I figured that we'd probably go out to dinner as usual.
Maybe we should?
I agree, and let's stop at the grocery store on the way home.
It hadn't occurred to me that we could go to the grocery store on a Saturday night before you suggested that. Now, I love it.
Okay, great. So I hope you had a chance to listen to the dialogue. That's the conversation between Peter and Allie. So let's talk about this dialogue and let's see if we can figure out why they're using the past perfect tense or the simple past or the present perfect tense. Okay, so let's start with Peter. Okay, Peter says, "Hey, Allie, you know how we were talking yesterday about how we used to study languages when we were in college? So do you know used to, right? Used to means finished. It means now I don't. So if I say like I used to study language, it means now I'm not studying. I don't do that now. So it does not continue into the present, used to. So we used to study languages when we were in college. I was curious. Had you ever studied Spanish before you took it in college? Okay, so those are two complete actions, both of which are finished in the past. So that's why Peter is using the past perfect tense, right? Had you ever studied Spanish before you took it in college? That's the second action. Okay, Allie says, yeah, actually, I had been living in Spain with a host family for 2 months. Okay, so now Allie is using the past perfect progressive. Okay, that is used for a long action that was ongoing while another action happened. Okay, so we're stressing the ongoing nature, the unfinished nature of that action. It happened over a long period of time and it wasn't finished when she began to really love the language and culture. Okay, so when you want to emphasize an ongoing action that's interrupted by another action, both of which are finished in the past, use the past perfect progressive with simple past. Okay, that's when I decided to study Spanish in high school and later in college. All right, in this sentence, that's when I decided. There's only one action, so you want to use the simple past. We're not comparing two actions here, right? So just one action, it's finished, it's complete, so I decided. Peter says, that's right, I remember. So, you're pretty good at Spanish? Allie says, soy bastante bueno en español. Peter, that's awesome. Oh, by the way, not to change the subject, but are you getting hungry? I haven't eaten much today. Okay, now we shift. We shift into the present perfect tense. Okay, why the present perfect tense? Because this is an action that continues into the present. The fact that Peter has not eaten much today up until now. He hasn't eaten much except for some ice cream he had about an hour ago. So he hasn't eaten much. He hasn't eaten much, or Peter would say, I haven't eaten much. That's the present perfect tense because it informs the present. It's not complete in the past. It's up until now. So we want to use the present perfect tense. I haven't eaten much today. Allie says, actually, I am getting hungry. But didn't you, here's simple past question, one action, so simple past, didn't you just eat that pint of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream about an hour ago? That's a complete finished action. It's one action, so we want to use the simple past, okay? Yes, I did, all right? So he answers in the simple past, but I hadn't eaten anything today before I ate that pint of ice cream. So do you remember way back in the beginning of the video, I said we can use the past perfect tense to provide context, right? It's not always sequential. If we want to talk about sequential, A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sequential actions, we can just use the simple past for everything. The past perfect is deeper than that. It can provide context, a background action. It can provide meaning, a contextual relationship. In this sentence, I hadn't eaten anything today before I ate that pint of ice cream. So Peter is giving his context. He's explaining why he ate that whole pint of ice cream. It's because he hadn't eaten anything before then. So those two actions are related to each other. One of them, I hadn't eaten, in the negative, past perfect. That is providing a context, a contextual relationship to explain why he ate all that ice cream. But he's still hungry, right? Because 1 pint of ice cream, it's not that much if that's all you eat for hours and hours and hours. At least for me, I need more than pints of ice cream. Anyways, I'd love to eat again right now, but I'm not sure if we have any food since it's Saturday and we usually go out to eat. All right, we usually go out to eat. Usually, using simple present there. If you want to know more about simple present, check out my first video, by the way. Okay, Ali says, let me check. No, there's only ice cream, butter and barbecue sauce in here. That's not much in their fridge. I went to the grocery store 2 days ago, but I hadn't planned to buy food for this weekend. I went to the grocery store 2 days ago, but before then, before she went to the grocery store, she had not planned to buy food for this weekend, right? So the first action was she hadn't planned to buy food for the weekend, and then she goes to the grocery store and she does not buy food for the weekend, right? So I hadn't, that's first, and then she went to the grocery store, that's second. All right, again, that's context. That explains why she didn't buy that much food when she went to the grocery store after she had not planned to buy food for this weekend, okay? So Peter says, yeah, I had thought about getting some food for today, but then I decided that we'd probably go out for dinner as usual. So it sounds like maybe yesterday or the day before, one of these weekdays, say it was Thursday or Friday, Peter, he had thought about maybe getting some food, but then he figured, we're not going to need it because we'll just go out to dinner, okay? So I had thought, that's the first action, and then I decided, or I realized, okay, that's the second action. I figured that we'd probably go out to dinner as usual. Maybe we should, Ali says. Peter, I agree, and let's stop at the grocery store on the way home. Sounds like a good idea. Ali says, it hadn't occurred to me that we could go to the grocery store on a Saturday night before you suggested that now. I love it, okay? It hadn't occurred to me that we could go to the grocery store on a Saturday night before you suggested that now. So this is interesting because Peter just suggested that to Ali, right? Just like 2 seconds ago, he suggested that. But that action is finished, right? Both of these actions are finished. So it hadn't occurred to me, that's finished, until you suggested that. It's finished. So this sentence illustrates that you can use the past perfect tense for 2 actions that occurred literally just seconds ago, as long as they're both finished, okay? We do often use the past perfect tense for comparing 2 actions that are finished a long time ago, but I just wanted to illustrate that you could also use the past perfect tense with the simple past to illustrate actions that are finished just, a few seconds ago, just really recently. Okay, so that's the listening part. I hope that was helpful. I really like listening activities because it tests your listening comprehension, but it also tests your understanding of these different verb tenses. And again, most of this is the past perfect tense, but I did throw in that one present perfect tense, I haven't eaten, just to mix it up a little bit, okay? I like to make my worksheets realistic, okay? And in realistic everyday conversation, right, we use all these different verb tenses together. It's very rare that you have one conversation that is just based in the past perfect tense and the simple past. So that's why I wanted to throw in that present perfect tense just to kind of make it more realistic, okay? All right, so I hope that was helpful. Let's move on to part 2. This is choose the correct answer. This is like grammar in context. It's multiple choice. So have a look at this paragraph here, and you'll see 10 questions. And see if you can decide whether it's A, B, or C in each of these 10 questions. And then I'll come back and let's talk about the correct answers. All right, so I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, so let's have a look at the grammar and context. Okay, let's start here. 10 years ago, I started learning my favorite instrument, the guitar. Okay, so 10 years ago, right? That's finished. That's a long time ago. 10 years ago, I started learning my favorite instrument, the guitar. I had wanted, I have wanted, or I have been wanting. What do you think? I had wanted is past perfect. I have wanted is present perfect. I have been wanting is the present perfect progressive. So what do you think is appropriate in this context? 10 years ago is finished, right? So we don't want to say I have wanted or I have been wanting because that's the present perfect, and that implies that it continues into the present. But this does not continue. This is 10 years ago. That's a long time ago. So we should say I had wanted. Okay. Now, when you say I had wanted, right, that's past perfect tense. That always sets up another action. We only use the past perfect tense to compare two actions. So we're setting up another action that is going to happen second, and that's going to use the simple past, and that's number 2. So number 2 should be the simple past. I was too busy with work obligations, so I never began studying it. Okay. Back in high school. Do you know that expression, back in college, back in high school? It means like I'm not there anymore. So if I say to you like back in college, I'm obviously not in college anymore. Back in high school, I'm not in high school anymore. That was a long time ago. So back in high school, what do you think? I have played, or I played the trumpet in the school orchestra for 3 years. All right, be careful with number 3. That's just one action, right? We're just talking about playing the trumpet. We're not comparing two actions. We're not providing context for another action. We're only discussing one action. When you're talking about one action, you should use either the present perfect, right? I have played, or the simple past, I played. Now, the present perfect would be used if it continues into the present, or if it happened at a very general time. But this is a specific time. This is a specific time in high school, and this is a specific time which is finished. So the correct answer should be I played, simple past, because it's just one action. It's complete. It's finished in the past. One action, simple past. Not present perfect, because this does not continue into the present, okay? So number 3 should be I played. That's C, all right? I played the trumpet in the school orchestra for 3 years. In fact, my motivation to learn the guitar, what do you think? Started, has started, or had started while I was a member of the school orchestra. Now be careful, right? Number 4 and number 3 are very similar. So it's only discussing one action. It's finished. So this is again the simple past. So number 4 should be started, right? For the same reason that number 3 is played. We're discussing one action, only one action. We're not comparing two, and this action is finished in the past. So number 4 should be A, started while I was a member of the school orchestra. Okay, number 5. I remember I had been playing, I have been playing, or I played the trumpet for about 6 months when something else happened. So this is providing context. This is a background action. This is comparing two actions. So most likely we are going to use the past perfect or the past perfect progressive for number 5. So I remember I had been playing. That's the correct answer. I had been playing. Not I have been playing, right? Because that's recent. That's recent, right? Continuing into the present. Why not C? I remember I played the trumpet for about 6 months when, that's the simple past, right? Usually used for just one action or a sequential action. But number 5 is a background action, right? It's a background action that's ongoing. So the correct answer should be A, right? I had been playing. I had been playing. That's an ongoing action. I had been playing, past perfect progressive, when, number 6, it occurred to me, simple past. It occurred to me that maybe I could also learn to play the guitar, okay? Number 7, which has always been, and which had always been my favorite instrument. Okay, this fact of being my favorite instrument, does that continue into the present? Yes, it does. Look at the first sentence there. 10 years ago, I started learning my favorite instrument, the guitar. So he started learning it 10 years ago, but it's still his favorite instrument now. So the activity, the condition, the state of this being my favorite instrument is still alive. It still continues into the present moment, right? So number 7 should be which has always been, not which was. It's not finished, right? It's still my favorite instrument. So which has always been. Had always been? No, that's also finished. It's still my favorite instrument. We should say be, the present perfect, which has always been my favorite instrument. Okay, so number 7, which has always been, that's present perfect. Let's move on to number 8. Okay, I was so happy when I began learning the guitar 10 years ago, but unfortunately I had stopped, I have stopped, or I stopped playing it about 6 months ago. So 6 months ago, that's a while ago, so we don't want to say I have stopped. Is that providing context for another action? No, it's not providing context. It's the main action. It's the main action. So that should be C. I stopped playing it about 6 months ago. You could say I had stopped playing it when something else happened. That's not the situation here. I stopped is the main action. So I stopped. C. I stopped playing it about 6 months ago. Number 9, I haven't realized, I hadn't been realizing, or I hadn't realized how much I missed it until, okay, now we do have 2 actions here, both of which are finished in the past, so it sounds like the past perfect would be best. I hadn't realized how much I missed it until, what? Until I began, simple past, till I began playing it again last week. Okay, so number 9 is C and number 10 is B, and that goes together, past perfect, simple past. Okay, great. So let's move on to part 3. This is the editing. To edit something is to correct something, to make modifications or changes to something. So I'm going to give you a paragraph here. This is a paragraph which has six mistakes in the use of the past perfect or the present perfect or the simple past. So please have a look at this paragraph. See if you can find the 6 mistakes. See if you can edit them. See if you can correct them. And then let's talk about them in just a minute. Okay? So please have a look and I'll see you real soon. Okay, great. So let's have a look at this paragraph together. Let's see if we can find and correct those 6 mistakes, okay? So here we go. Dear Edward, I hope you're enjoying your vacation in Spain. All right, that's the present progressive, right? I hope you are enjoying your vacation in Spain. So that's a correct sentence, but it also tells us that Edward is actively enjoying his vacation in Spain right now. He's not finished, okay? So he's on vacation right now as we speak, okay? I hope you're enjoying your vacation in Spain. I've been meaning to tell you that I finally finished reading the manuscript of your new book. I've been meaning to tell you. That's present perfect progressive. That's used for an action that started in the past and continues into the present. Is that correct in this context? Yes, because she's telling him right now. So this action started in the past, it continues into the present. So I've been meaning to tell you, and I'm telling you this right now. I've been meaning to tell you that I finally finished reading the manuscript of your new book, Beach Lover from Mars, and I have to say that I'm just really impressed with your writing style. Is that good, that sentence? Yes, I am just really impressed. I am impressed is simple present. We use that to express our opinion. You know, for example, I love New York, right? That's simple present. It's something that's usually true or always true. Simple present. So I am impressed. That's good. That sentence is good. Honestly, I have never heard of a romantic science fiction themed novel before I read your book. Okay, be careful here, right? Both of these actions are finished, right? She already read the book and she's already heard about this new genre because she heard about this new genre when she started to read his book, which happened in the past. So this action does not continue into the present. So the correct answer should be, honestly, I had never. That's past perfect. I had never heard of a romantic science fiction beach-themed novel before I read your book. Simple past, okay? And I was deeply impressed by the originality and breadth of your characters. I especially had loved the intergalactic beach dog. Okay, intergalactic beach dog. All right, is that sentence good? I especially had loved the intergalactic beach dog. Is that okay? No. You would say I had loved if you're providing context or background action for something else. Remember, past perfect is always used for two actions. This sentence only has one action. So it should say, I especially loved the intergalactic beach dog. Okay? I haven't expected to find sympathy with such a hot-tempered and unforgiving creature when I first encountered the space canine in the second chapter. Now remember, she's already read this book, so when she first encountered this character, that was a while ago. That's a complete action. So to describe something that happened before that, we should use the past perfect, all right? So she should say, I had not expected. I haven't expected, that brings you into the present. But this is an action that occurred in the past, before she encountered the character, before she first read about the character. Remember, she's finished with the book. So I hadn't, past perfect negative, I hadn't expected to find sympathy with such a hot-tempered and unforgiving creature when I first encountered, simple past, the space canine in the second chapter. But he really stood out. Do you know stand out? It's like when something is very noticeable or recognizable. He really stood out as a compelling and relatable anti-hero. Okay, I have wanted to tell you how much I loved your new book before you left for Spain. Now remember, Edward is in Spain right now, so before you left for Spain, before Edward left for Spain, that's in the past. So to describe something that happened before then, you should also use the past perfect. So I had wanted. Not I have wanted. That brings you into the present. You should say, or she should say, Evelyn should say, I had wanted to tell you how much I loved your new book before you left for Spain. Simple past. But with all the chaos and excitement surrounding daylight savings time, okay, chaos and excitement, okay, surrounding daylight savings times, which you know we always celebrate with a big party at my house, I simply forgot to mention it to you before you left for Spain. I forgot to mention it to you before you left for Spain. Okay, those are sequential actions using simple past. That's fine. You don't always have to provide context with the past perfect. Remember, as I said at the beginning of this video, if actions are just in sequence, A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and no one action is providing a context for the other action, you can just use simple past for everything. So that's what she's doing here. I simply forgot before you left, simple past, simple past. That's fine, okay? So I simply forgot to mention it to you before you left for Spain. Okay, I want to let you know that I had sent you a package. Is that correct? I want to let you know that I had sent. That's past perfect tense. And remember, past perfect tense is always used with two actions, right? This sentence, there's only one action. Evelyn's sending this package. So this is not a contextual action. This is a single action. So we should say, I sent, or you could say I have sent, present perfect. Remember, present perfect can be used for one action. So I want to let you know that I sent or I have sent you a package because it's just one action. I hadn't planned to mail you anything, but then I had found or found. I hadn't planned, that's past perfect tense. I had not planned, past perfect tense, and then the second action will always be simple past. So I hadn't planned to mail you anything, but then I found the perfect gift, which I know you'll enjoy while you're in Spain. Simple past. So those are your 6 mistakes. All right, so that's it. That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this video, all 3 activities. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you found value from this video. Once again, just to summarize, the past perfect tense is used for 2 actions, both of which are finished in the past. The purpose of the past perfect is to be really clear about which action happened first and which action happened second. We can also use it to provide context when 2 actions are not equal. We want to provide context to another action. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much. Until next time, stay active. I'll see you later. Bye.